Hi everyone, welcome to yet another workshop offered by TCS in preparation for the CIMA Management Case Study examination happening in May 2025. This workshop is dedicated to E2 related aspects of the syllabus. So the session outcomes are, we will firstly brief you on the syllabus for E2 and overview. This will be followed by a discussion of an E2 related task from our mock 1. And we will also open up the session today for a Q&A. And remember, since this is the last workshop, please raise any questions you have pertaining to E2 or in general with regard to exam preparation. And a reminder about one more workshop happening next Sunday. So please note the change in the day as well as the time. So this will be a workshop focused on exam preparation leading to the last week. So we will not be discussing anything technical in this workshop that will be happening next week. And of course, as you get closer to the exam, you have to mentally be prepared, and we intend to help you with your preparation closer to the exam in this workshop. So firstly, the E2 syllabus overview. So let me refer to the syllabus coverage document from our mock exams. So as you may be familiar, we went through P2 and F2 related areas in the last two workshops, and today we will focus on the E2 related aspects of the syllabus. So we can start with business models. Definitely one of the variants, if not, and most likely more than one variant, could examine business models. So you need to be thorough with defining value, creating value, delivering value, and capturing value in terms of Trimayr. Now, in the last sitting, we saw that in the variants, whenever there was a task on business models, the examiner had included the extract from the pre-scene as the second attachment. I repeat, as the second attachment, not the only reference material, but as the second reference material. Now, this is to help you save a bit of time. Anyways, the pre-scene is available for access during the examination, but a well-prepared candidate would not be referring to the pre-scene in the examination because it's a time-constrained exam. And if you are prepared well enough, you wouldn't need to refer to the pre-scene in the examination. But to make your life easy, the examiner does provide or did provide uh, the business model aspects of the company in a reference material. However, I would suggest you stick to the summary that we provide in our annotated pre-scene. You will be able to quickly remember those points and incorporate them into your answer in the examination if you stick to this approach. So we have a bullet point summary. Please refer to it. It will be easy for you to remember the points. And please also remember any question on any question pertaining to business models will require a solid understanding of what is Trimayr's current business model. So you need to be thorough with all four aspects because the task will require your understanding of the current business model to construct a response. And you could also be tested on business ecosystems. There can be changes in the market that we operate in, or there can be diversification, there can be vertical integration. So there can be changes to the ecosystem within which Trimayr operates. So you could be tested on, say, risks or opportunities that may arise due to changes in the business ecosystem. So you need to have a practical understanding rather than a theoretical understanding when it comes to this topic. Disruptive technology has been one of the themes of a variant in recent times. So if you refer to, say, the industry analysis document that we've compiled, or if you had attempted the mock exams, you would have some idea about what could be considered as disruptive technology for Trimayr. So in light of that, there could be tasks on how a particular disruptive technology impacts Trimayr and how the board wishes to proceed, countering the disruptive technology, which would be shaking things up in terms of the existing business model. Moreover, with regard to disruptive technology, a closely related topic is data analytics because Trimayr, as you know, uses a BIS, a business intelligence system. And it appears that we may not be making optimum or the maximum use out of the existing BIS system. So it is likely that the examiner wants to test your knowledge on how we can use BIS to improve certain aspects of the business. So currently, we are more focused on tracking the KPIs and analyzing the performance of the salons based on the KPIs and ranking them. But there is so much more that we can do with a BIS system. And remember, the BIS system used by Trimayr captures both structured as well as unstructured data. So there is a lot of scope in terms of what we could do with the BIS. So please be familiar with the concept. You could also be tested with regard to accounting aspects. And this is also something that you have practiced within our mock exams itself. Moving on, we have the project management topic. Now, this topic can be tested from a technical perspective or from a practical perspective. So you need to be prepared for both, especially when it comes to technical aspects. The project management tools, such as a work breakdown structure, a network diagram. So we've seen tasks being set on some of these tools. So you need to have an idea about when and what is the usefulness of different tools, because the project constraints are managed using some of these tools. Planning for time, planning for quality, and planning for cost. So all these constraints are inevitable in any project, and to manage those constraints we will be using certain tools. So you need to know which tools would be helpful to manage which constraints. And from a technical front, those are some key points that you need to remember as you prepare for the examination. Project life cycle. Remember, there are two models. There are two alternative models when it comes to project life cycle. I would urge you to be thorough with both models. We've seen sometimes the examiner specify the exact model that he intends you to use. And if that is the case, you need to use that exact model which the examiner has specified within the task. If not, you could opt for one of the two models. And once again, this is something you have practiced within our mock exams. And project stakeholders, of course, if you get a task which relates to stakeholders, relatively easier. So you need to be practical. You should not be theoretical if there's a task set on stakeholder management, because in real life, it's about managing stakeholders based on their real needs and interests. So that's where the scenario will give you some background, and you need to make sure that you use that information and come up with appropriate suggestions as to how we will manage the project stakeholders. Moving on, the third component of the syllabus, managing people. So highly likely area in any variant, because you are a finance manager. And if you look at past papers, you will see one of these topics relating to managing people is definitely tested within each variant. So that's a core activity as well. As a middle level manager, you need to have people skills. So that's something I would urge you to be prepared well. And of course, relatively, if you are practical enough, you would be able to score full marks on tasks that relate to this. So I would urge you to make it a priority to know the concepts well with regard to managing people, and in the examination, make it a point that you don't get theoretical or technical in terms of your answer. So with regard to managing people, the subtopics that you could be tested on include leadership. So once again, just be prepared for a task on leadership, which would be practical rather than, theoretical. So don't write theories, don't write, different models, but look at the situation, look at the task, what exactly is being specified. Sometimes the task could relate to managing a particular situation, how leadership should be demonstrated in a particular situation. Sometimes it could relate to whether a particular leadership style demonstrated by an individual is suited to the context. So we can't generalize as to how this topic can be tested, but you need to be prepared to answer in different perspectives. Negotiation, well, another popular topic, because as you would agree with me, middle level managers, have to negotiate both with internal stakeholders. You might have negotiations with other departments, other functions within the organization, and you might also engage in negotiations with outsiders. So remember, we report to the SFM, the senior finance manager, who in turn reports to the finance director. So we are assisting the board more often than not. So when the board also needs some assistance with regard to negotiation, you are likely to advise the board through the senior finance manager. So be prepared. And in the task that we will be discussing today, we will look at how a task relating to negotiation can be tested and what your response should be like. Conflict resolution, another practical topic. So if there's a conflict related scenario, make sure that you don't write theories or you don't come up with technical answers, but look at the conflict at hand and look at how best it can be solved from a practical perspective. Because in real life, as you would agree, at our workplaces, we don't resolve conflicts based on theories or models or frameworks. You need to understand the root causes of the conflict, and you need to address the root causes in such a way that all parties are willing to compromise and work together. So, a likely scenario, especially given the fact that it is a practical scenario that we would encounter. Health and safety, well, the pre-scene gives us enough and more hints that health and safety is such a critical area for Trimayr. We have been specifically told that customers are exposed to hazardous treatments, and even employees over a period of time. The exposure to certain chemicals could cause some health and safety related concerns. So there can be health and safety related issues. It could also bring in, from an F2 perspective, the discussion of IAS 37 provisions, contingent liabilities, and you should be prepared to handle F2 related aspects as well with regard to health and safety related concerns. So once again, you have to be practical, and you have to see whether there have been failures with regard to maintaining appropriate health and safety protocols. And if we are to address shortcomings, how best to go about it. So please, be prepared for a scenario related to health and safety as well. Disciplinary action, once again, a highly relevant area, because you have been given some hint that the apprentices or the trainees are not easy to manage. If you would look at the newspaper articles, the blog posts towards the end of the annotated pre-scene, you will see that these new generation of hairdressers have a lot of complaints with regard to their first day, and having to make coffee and having to sweep and whatnot. So managing staff, especially managing apprentices, is not going to be easy, and you could be tested on disciplinary action related aspects as well. So remember, there is a step-by-step process we ought to follow when it comes to disciplinary actions, and that could be the focus in the examination as well. And as you would have seen within a mock examination, refer to the answer, refer to the steps outlined in the answer. And as long as you know those steps, you should be okay with an exam related task. And please also note how we have applied those steps to the given scenario. And you will find that answer plan, the answer summary, which will once again give you the 5 points in a summary. So closer to the examination, as you get closer to the examination, the six mock exams, each mock with say 10 subtasks, you have about 60 subtasks at your hand, so that's 60 different aspects of the syllabus being covered. So if you use those summary notes, the answer summaries, and if you can refresh your memory with regard to those key points, it will be helpful in your examination in 10 days time. Moving on, team management, once again a popular topic in the examination, because one, you will agree with me, at middle level as the finance manager, we would be part of a team, or we might sometimes be leading a team, or we could be advising the senior finance manager or the board with regard to how teams are to be managed. So once again, don't get too theoretical. You don't need to know about the different theories on managing teams and so on. Most of the time it is practical, and it's about making sure the team has the correct composition. So in fact, within first mock itself, we have a task in the fourth section on the composition of a team. There can be issues pertaining to the team not working together, lack of involvement, teamwork among the members, how we could address it. There can also be scenarios where the team needs direction and maybe some performance measures or KPIs. So there are different ways in team management can be tested. Please make sure that you read and understand the task specifically so that you address only the required task. And this is a problem that we had seen within the answer scripts that we marked, and we had raised this concern as well. Just give a specific response to the specific task that is set to you. That's the way to score marks. Communication, well, if you are presented with a task on communication, it is likely to be easier compared to some of the other topics. So once again, if you have a situation where maybe a team or an individual or a function is not really supporting you on a particular initiative, or is not really understanding the needs, then there can be the requirement to advise the senior finance manager or the board as to how you can effectively communicate. So we've looked at a similar situation within our mock exams. As you would remember, I can't actually spoil the mock exam because some of you have still not attempted the mock. But sometimes effective communication is needed to gain the support and to resolve some problems. So once again, from a practical perspective, it can be tested. And don't get theoretical when it comes to tasks on communication. You don't have to discuss about barriers for effective communication or the communication process or anything. Just be practical based on the scenario. And motivation could also be an issue, especially when it comes to teams. This can be related to a team or a function or an individual. It can relate to apprentices in the case of Trimayr, lack of motivation, and how we can address such concerns. Of course, the scenario, the reference material will give you some background to it. So based on that, you will need to construct your response. And related to that, you could also be examined with regard to a manager's responsibility, authority, and delegation related aspects. So please be prepared. People management is practical. I'm sure at your workplaces, you have to encounter, most of these issues, and you can draw from that practical experience, and you will be able to construct a solid response for this topic. So remember, in summary, there are three main topics within the syllabus. We start with business models. And as I mentioned, it's a highly likely scenario. So that's one component of the syllabus. Then we have project management. So be prepared from a technical as well as practical perspective. And then the third component, managing people. So that's about the syllabus outline, and we will look at a task relating to E2 next. So we are going back to mock exam 1, which we have been discussing in the past two workshops. Also, there are two tasks relating to E2, as you would agree. Section 1 has a task on business models. And then in section 2, we have another one with regard to negotiation. So that's what I would be focusing on today. So remember, we were looking at a diversification scenario, Trimayr entering the full service beauty salon market. And as we moved on to section 2, we found that the company is pursuing an acquisition strategy. And if you would recall, we had information about a company. So we have to have the background idea to construct a response for subtask A. So as always, let's read the task first, and then let's refer to the requirement. So the board has officially decided to enter the full service beauty salon market. However, as you outlined in your earlier report, the board has acknowledged the reputational risks of entering this market under the Trimayr brand. Therefore, the board is considering acquiring an existing chain of full-service beauty salons and integrating it into the Trimayr group. Please refer to the attached board meeting minutes for more details. And we are further told that the finance director wants to meet both of us to discuss matters pertaining to the acquisition. And we are being required to prepare some briefing notes covering the two subtasks. And another observation, we will also take this up within the Q&A session as well. We noted that some of your answers were referring to the board meeting minutes as reference material. Now, that's not the appropriate term. You are replying to an email to the boss at the end of the day. So you have to place yourself in the position of the finance manager. And if you say reference material or if you say task, then you are not actually showing an understanding that you are employed in a simulated work environment. So please note those differences. Of course, such issues are always pointed out in the feedback, so I'm sure you would have been able to address those. All right, let's read through the reference material to understand the background. The board has formally decided to enter the full-service beauty salon market, but acknowledges the reputational risks of doing so under the Trimayr brand. To mitigate these risks, the board has agreed to pursue an acquisition strategy and integrate an existing beauty salon chain into the Trimayr group under a distinct brand identity. So makes sense because it is a risk mitigation strategy. We are looking at diversification, but the diversification will be under a different brand, and that would mean the Trimayr brand's identity would be protected. The board has identified Grace and Glamour Salons, G&G, a leading chain of upmarket full-service beauty salons in Dazzleland, as the preferred acquisition target. Originally founded by Reynold Ryan and Lively Blake, G&G has built a strong reputation for its premium beauty and wellness services in Dazzleland. So it appears that this is a good strategic fit because they serve the premium or the upmarket segment, and they have a strong reputation in the market. So that goes along with the brand Trimayr has also built. Since its founding in 2012, the company has expanded from a single boutique salon into a respected brand operating 28 full-service beauty salons in the upmarket segment. Known for its expertise in hairstyling, skincare, and holistic beauty treatments, G&G has earned a loyal customer base and a strong market position. So that's another competitive advantage. You have a loyal customer base and you're spread across the country with 28 salons. So an ideal fit if you're looking at expansion and if you're looking at rapid expansion. The company was recently ranked among the top 10 full-service beauty salons in Dazzleland in a customer survey conducted by Infinite Fashion and Style magazine. So we have further good news about the company. And it raises the concern when the company is performing so well, Would the owners be prepared to sell? So there is definitely a reason why the examiner is giving us so much information about the company and so much positive information about the company. All right, let's read through the last para as well. G&G is wholly owned by its two founders who hold director positions in the business. So it's a private entity. That's what the takeaway here is. Two owners and they hold director positions. That means they are still actively involved in the business. And the expansion and the growth, everything could be coming from their direct involvement. The company has relied on debt capital for expansion. Well, that's pretty obvious because the company is owned by two founders, which means the equity has come only from two shareholders, which has constrained its growth. Okay, so there is something which is favorable for us. The fact that they have relied on debt has limited their growth potential. So maybe there is scope for us to pitch the idea that, okay, why not we look at growth and maybe convince them to actually consider a transfer of their ownership to us, an acquisition as we term it. Trimayr board intends to proceed with a full acquisition of G&G and agreed to meet again to discuss the acquisition structure and potential sources of funding for the acquisition. Okay, so Trimayr wants to acquire the company 100%, a full acquisition. And that means the two founders will have to, bid farewell to their company. Highly unlikely, but yeah, that's what we are looking at. Anyways, let's come back to the two subtasks. As you would remember, we discussed subtask B in our F2 workshop, which was conducted a couple of weeks back. So let's focus on subtask A. Advise the board on the approach that should be taken to successfully negotiate the acquisition of G&G salons with the two owners of the company for a full acquisition. So once again, the examiner is insisting that we want 100% ownership. Okay, that's not going to be easy, right? So we have to advise how we can negotiate a full acquisition of the company. And the task doesn't end there. The task further reads, and. So remember, the moment you see this conjunction, you need to understand that there are two aspects or two sub-requirements to be addressed. So it's not only about advising the board on the approach to successfully negotiate the acquisition of the company. We also need to identify the possible issues that may arise during the process. Well, I picked a few points the moment I read it. Okay, as I mentioned, there were so many good things about this company, and it's gonna be difficult to convince its owners to fully sell their company and have nothing left for them. Anyways, this is about approach to the negotiation. So remember, you can draw from your E2 technical knowledge. You can bring in 4 different points within the answer. So if you remember E2 theory on the topic of a negotiation, you would remember that there are 4 steps in the process of negotiation: preparation, opening, bargaining, and closing. So you can come up with an answer which will include a discussion of how you would go about preparation, opening, bargaining, and closing. You could refer to these 4 steps. However, even if the answer for this topic, I repeat, for this topic, for this task, even if an answer had not referred to the 4 steps, but had discussed the same, maybe in a different sense, you could still score a pass. But don't take it as a general rule. There are some topics where, say, for instance, project life cycle. Now, in a task relating to project life cycle, you need to be very specific about the 4 or 5 stages of the project life. So it's different from this task. So this is only for this particular subtask discussion. Ideally, try to incorporate an understanding of the four steps because that will help you in terms of covering the appropriate points within the answer. So you need to talk about preparation, opening, bargaining, and closing. So that's what we have actually done within our answers. So I'm sure you have access to the suggested answers. You can read through the answers and you will see that we have covered all four of those aspects. But remember, we also give you the answer plan or the answer summary, which will outline the technique and the approach that we took towards developing this full-fledged answer. And that's the answer we use for our masterclass videos. And we will use those same answer plans for discussion today as well. So here we are, approach that should be taken to successfully negotiate the acquisition and the possible issues that may arise during the process. So one thing we've done is, rather than discussing the issues separately, we have discussed the issues together with the approach. So as you will see, then and there we have highlighted what could be the issues that we will face in each of these stages, right? And you could follow the same approach because that can be easier to construct a response and that can save a lot of time for you as well. It's also acceptable to discuss the issues or the challenges separately, but it could be time consuming and sometimes it can affect the flow of your answer. So that is why we would suggest for this particular task to discuss the issues along with your suggestion with regard to the approach. So first things first, before the negotiation, remember we have to go through a preparation stage, right? And there is then the discussion during the negotiation. So firstly, let's look at what we ought to do before we start the negotiation. So remember, both parties would want something out of the negotiation. So we will need to find out what would be the expectations of the two founders in terms of the company. Would they be willing to sell the company? And if that is the case, what could be the price or what could be the terms under which they would be prepared to sell the company? So we will need to find what they would be interested in, and we need to look for a common ground to close the deal because we won't be able to reach a consensus if the expectations are different. So remember, it will ultimately come down to quoting a price. So let's conduct a due diligence on G&G. Yes, we have some information on the board minutes. We have some independent, accreditation for the company that they were ranked among the top 10 full service beauty salons. But remember, even these rankings can nowadays be manipulated. You can easily get these agencies to give you a favorable outcome. So we have to do our own due diligence to ascertain the truth facts with regard to the company's performance. So let's do our due diligence and let's do a financial and non-financial analysis. Now we will have a problem here with regard to the financial analysis. I will outline it shortly. But why we do this is because we need to establish a realistic price for G&G, a price that the two owners would be willing to accept to transfer their ownership to us. So this is the approach with regard to preparation, but we have some issues in this approach. The first issue is that G&G is a privately held entity. That means the company has no share price, because a business valuation would start with what is the market share price for a company. And unfortunately for G&G, there is no share price available. And not only that, don't forget, it is a privately held entity. They are not required to disclose their financial statements to the public. So not only the share price, but we won't also have details pertaining to their profitability or any financial metric as such. So that complicates further because we can't arrive at a price without knowing their financial performance, right? And, the price could be higher or lower in that case. So the only other option is for us to approach the company directly and seek the information. Now, once again, that's a problem because we might be, seen as approaching an acquisition in a hostile context. So management of the company may not be willing to disclose. Why should they? Sometimes companies make genuine offers to acquire another company. Sometimes they make an offer so that you can get access to the books of the company. So it is doubtful whether the management of the company would be willing to give us that information, because for them to give their books to us, the shareholders should be interested in divesting their ownership. And if the shareholders are not interested, then it is unlikely that the management will be willing to provide us access to these details that we are requesting. So we have to try our best, and we have to see whether we can extract as much information as possible. And when we know that we have done our due diligence, and when we know we have, as practical as possible, done a valuation for the company's ownership, then we will arrange a meeting with the management and shareholders. So that's about the preparatory stage of the negotiation. And then we move on to the opening stage, which will happen during the negotiation. So we start the meeting where we will express an interest in acquiring the ownership of the company, and we will present an opening bid. And whenever we negotiate, ideally we should quote a price which is lower than our valuation for the company, because this will provide a scope to increase the prices, because definitely we will get to a bargaining stage. The owners are not going to accept our opening bid. So let's have some scope to increase the price, and let's start with maybe a lower price. And we will also need to specify how we will settle the price, because sometimes we may not be able to fully fund the acquisition using cash, in which case we might have to consider something like a share for share exchange. So we would also need to highlight how we would be settling the purchase consideration, and that will complete the terms of the offer, the price, and how we intend to settle the price. Now, obviously, as soon as we open the negotiation, we could be faced with some issues. The worst thing that could happen is the shareholders refusing to sell their shareholding in the company right away. And, that can happen, and that could be bad news. But let's assume that they are willing to negotiate. In that case, where they are not willing to divest the shares fully, we can't have 100%. Let's compromise. What we want is control. Okay, what we are looking at is control, at least a subsidiary. So maybe let's pitch a lesser shareholding, but a shareholding which is sufficient enough for Trimayr to gain control, right? So as an alternative, let's pitch maybe a 51% shareholding. We can come up to that point, but if you go below that, it will be difficult to establish control, and the company will not be a subsidiary in that case. So the management should go prepared to lower the percentages in case the shareholders of the company refuse to sell a majority stake. And once again, they may quote an exaggerated price, because remember, it's not that they want to sell the company, but it is us who wants to buy the company. So obviously, there can be a situation where even for a lower percentage of shareholding, they quote an exaggerated price, and they could also insist on a share for share exchange. So they may be willing to exchange shares, but they may be willing to sell their shares, but they could insist on ownership within Trimayr. So in that case, what happens is they will transfer the ownership of their company to Trimayr, but they will own a share of Trimayr. So it's not that they have completely let go of their business. So this was, as you know, this is the arrangement that even companies like Facebook did, right? So they actually went for a share exchange with the founders of WhatsApp, And of course, there was an outright cash payment around $4 billion, but there was a share for share exchange, which came up to about $15 million. And in fact, when the deal closed, they had a better market value for the shares. So sometimes they could insist on ownership at Trimayr. And we have to be careful, because existing shareholders may not agree to a new shareholder coming in, as it will dilute the existing shareholding of the company. And we have to be particularly careful, because Trimayr is a listed company and you don't want to go against the wishes of the shareholders. So another issue that we could face is that the founders of G&G insist on a share for share exchange, and that would not be feasible unless our shareholders agree. So we may have to buy some more time to proceed further. So after the opening, we will move on to a bargaining stage. That is, if they are willing to negotiate and if they are willing to divest at least a certain percentage of their ownership. So in the bargaining stage, we will discuss to achieve a mutually beneficial arrangement. So once again, during the bargaining stage, we will want to pay less, whereas the shareholders of G&G may want to achieve more. Because remember, once again, they have the upper hand, they have the bargaining power. And no one can force them to sell their company, because we've seen sometimes students come up with responses where they say, let's go and acquire a company. It's not like you buy something off the shelf from a supermarket. The owners must be willing to sell their company, right? So, as you would know, what Facebook wanted to acquire Snapchat, wanted to acquire Twitter, right? But those companies' founders were not interested in divesting their ownership. So you can be rich, you can be Elon Musk, or you can be Mark Zuckerberg, but if the company's owners do not want to sell their company, no matter what the price is, then any negotiation would fail. So here, the shareholders of G&G, they have the upper hand, they have the bargaining power, so they could still insist on a higher price. And we can counter it by coming up with an alternative consideration strategy, which could be a deferred or a contingent consideration. So in a deferred consideration scenario, you agree to pay a portion of the price at a later date, maybe 1 or 2 years later. And in a contingent consideration scenario, not so practical, because companies normally don't agree to this in real life. You would agree to pay a certain price if after the acquisition, the subsidiary achieves certain targets. For instance, after acquisition, if the company achieves a 10% year-on-year growth in revenue, or maybe a 5% growth in net profit year on year, then we will pay you an extra amount. So you can counter an excessive valuation by proposing contingent consideration, where you argue, look here, your price is high, and let's see how the company performs the next year. And if, as you say, the company is in fact profitable and generates so much bottom line and top line, then of course we will pay you this extra amount. But that extra amount is contingent upon achieving these conditions. So we can try, but it's up to the management. It's up to the current shareholders of G&G whether they want to agree to it or not. And ultimately, the worst case scenario could be the price that they are asking significantly exceeds a fair market price. And in that case, for the sake of negotiation, don't shake hands, because the acquisition is not advisable, as it will not add value, or it will not increase shareholder wealth. So we will have to let go if that issue persists. So the closing stage would include both parties reaching a consensus. So if both parties reach a consensus, then the negotiation will proceed to a fourth and final step. But if both parties don't reach a consensus, we say that the deal didn't close. So we weren't able to finalize anything, and both parties parted away during the bargaining stage, or sometimes during the opening stage itself, or before even the opening stage. You could be asked, why are we requesting a meeting? and they could straight away say, sorry, we are not interested in selling the company at this point in time. But within your answer, you have to proceed on the basis of the negotiation going until its end. And we are saying if we are able to reach a consensus, then during the closing stage, we will put the agreement, the verbal agreement into writing, and then we will proceed to finalize the legal procedures. So these are the key points that we have covered within the suggested answer. So make sure when you write your response, it is points explained in paragraph. Okay, don't reproduce the answer plan, right? These are the points that you should have developed to a full-fledged answer. So that's about the discussion pertaining to the E2 related task. So I will open up the session for a Q&A, and the good news keep coming in. So this is with regard to our most recent sitting and the pass rates. And let me pause the recording and open up the session for a Q&A. And remember, since this is our last workshop, if you have any technical questions, please do raise them today, because in the next week's workshop, we will avoid taking up technical questions because the workshop is on a Sunday and the exam is on Wednesday. And sometimes some candidates start to panic when, all sort of technical questions come up, and then we start answering them because the fear, the panic sets in closer to the examination. So please raise any technical questions or any questions with regard to exam prep during the Q&A session. And let me pause the recording to facilitate the discussion. All right, thank you for the questions. And please remember, you can raise the questions in our WhatsApp groups as well. Or if you think you will need to individually clarify those with us, you can always text us. And as time permits, we will respond as fast as we can. So please contact us through these social media handles and our email as well as our WhatsApp number. And reminder that we have short clips on exam prep as well as pre-scene analysis, especially on the YouTube as well as TikTok forums. So please make use of them. And until the next webinar, thank you for joining in and have a great night.